So it's been forbidden by the Nintendo deities to remove the external plastic layer over this Nintendo Switch 2 screen. But since I am not beholden to animated Newmans of the Mario world, I'm just gonna do it. The Switch 2 might not survive though, so preemptive effing chat for my boy. The screen protector is extremely difficult to remove. It definitely won't be falling off on its own. Nintendo says this plastic top layer is here to help prevent shards of glass from going everywhere if the Switch screen gets broken, much like automotive windshields are laminated to enhance safety. This does make me think, however, if this glass underneath the plastic, the digitizer, is so susceptible to fragmenting, then it might not be glued to the LCD. This would make repairs easier, of course, but it's just one of the many answers we are looking for during this teardown. I am very surprised to see my razor blade still scratching the surface under the plastic protector even after it's been removed, so either the layer under the plastic is also plastic or we're just scratching whatever remains of the screen protector adhesive. I have so many questions, and I'll be getting all the answers near the next few minutes. Let's start with the Joy-Cons. There are two visible tri-wing screws, the same tri-wings that Nintendo has been using in their portable system since 1989. There is another tri-wing and a silver Phillips head under the curved piece of plastic. Then the rear panel, which has the vibrator still attached, can pull away from the Joy-Con. Nintendo is calling this massive vibrator the HD Rumble 2, and it's at least twice the size of the vibrator in the Switch 1. It's a linear resonant actuator that uses force feedback to simulate all kinds of different situations. Since it's electronically started and stopped, it has a larger range of vibrations than an eccentric rotating mass vibrator. The larger size means stronger vibrations, but also quieter vibrations that can be more realistic and have faster response times. Now, I'll let other reviewers decide whether or not that's true. I just like seeing what things look like from the inside, and from the inside, the 3 coils of copper look absolutely incredible. The Joy-Con release lever itself can also be released at this point, along with 4 more screws that hold the Joy-Con battery tray. However, there are a few more screws hidden underneath the larger ZR or trigger button, and this trigger button can just pull away and unclip with a bit of force. Underneath there's a double torsion spring that provides the button's resistance and spring back. On the Switch 1, the trigger had dual compression springs that would yeet themselves off into oblivion during removal, so I'm glad Nintendo has switched up the design. There is a water damage indicator here below those buttons, attached to the battery tray, and this will turn pink and tattle on you if the controllers get wet. Remember, there are 0 protections or warranties against liquid, so keep all your gaming above sea level. There's another 3 screws along the orange magnetical attachment point, and I can pop out a plastic bracket, move over the trigger button board, and release the top right shoulder button. This still has 2 compression springs, but they remain attached to the button itself, and that should help with reassembly, if you're into that kind of thing. The battery tray can then be lifted up and away. It is still plugged into the Joy-Con mainboard, but we can't see any of the details or specs since it's most definitely still glued into the tray, which is strange. Nintendo didn't use any glue with its last generation of Joy-Con, and it's sad that they went backwards with repairability on this Joy-Con 2. Now all future battery replacements will require alcohol to remove, and that's not ideal. The battery is 500 mAh. The other main issue that plagued the original Joy-Cons was Joy-Con drift, where the joystick would get stuck in one direction forever. Luckily, the joystick on the Joy-Con 2 looks very easy to replace. The stick itself unscrews from the housing. It's more like a twist lock than a threaded screw, like a child-proof lid. And there are 2 screws on the backside. And credit to Nintendo, they are fixing the original Joy-Con drift for free, even if your warranty has expired. So I'm glad they're still taking care of customers, and I assume they'll be equally as generous if this new stick starts failing. With the joystick ribbon latch lifted and the ribbon unplugged, the Joy-Con joystick can joyously be removed from the controller without removing the motherboard. Thumbs up for that. And with some pressure, the cap can be pressed back in and twist locked just like it was before. If you do need to go deeper into the controller for some reason, the motherboard has 4 black screws holding it in place, along with 4 gold screws holding the orange magnetical attachment bar to the Joy-Con. There's 1 more motherboard screw hidden under the final ribbon, and then the Joy-Con motherboard in all her glory can be removed from the Joy-Con. Flipping it over, we see very similar button styles and rubber pad buttons that we've seen in every Nintendo and video game controller design for the past 30 years. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. The orange mounting bar has another compression spring inside, providing force for the plastic release lever pin. The female Joy-Con contact point for charging and mounting to the Switch 2 body is also extremely modular. This is good since that is a definite wear point. And finally, we get to the optical reader that turns the Joy-Con into a mouse for some of the video games. It has a few of its own compression springs that lift up the steel buttons that double as the magnet attachment points for holding the Joy-Con to the Switch body. The buttons are indeed steel and only painted on the exterior side. I mean, taking apart the Joy-Con 2 is not easy, but also, once you've seen it done, it's not too bad, as long as you keep your screws extremely organized. I believe in you. One tip, with the shoulder button, it's easiest to compress it onto the battery holder first, and then set it down into the rest of the housing. Everything lines up easier that way. The trigger clips in like a little Lego, and obviously my vibrator is no longer with us, but that shouldn't inhibit any functionality of the controller overall. Nintendo hardware is surprisingly resilient. And look at that, everything still works. It's time to take apart the main console. But quick side note, normally the worst thing about putting something back together is not being able to see the insides anymore. But with my Teardown skin, you can now have the coolest looking Switch 2 on planet Earth. Plus, we went pretty wild with the Easter eggs this time around, and there's no way you'll be able to find all of them. I'll leave a link down in the description. To get inside the main console of the Switch 2, there are quite a few cleverly hidden screws. It's like Pokemon Go all over again. Starting with the two obvious Phillips head screws at the bottom, Nintendo tried to hide two more screws under the colored vinyl plastic strips, but we found them. We only need to remove the two on the outside of the magnets at this time. Same thing goes for the orange side. Two more screws under the plastics on the outsides of the magnets. There's two more screws hidden under the long kickstand, and a final screw up at the top near the exhaust vent. I'll remove the deliciously disgusting game card cartridge. Please don't lick this. And the back panel can come free from the Switch 2 housing. There are no springs on the kickstand, just friction that lets the stand hold its place at any point along its route. And so far, the Switch 2 looks very much like the Switch 1. It's got a large turbofan in the center, and metal top plate covering up all the cool looking internals. I'll unplug a few of the signal wires in the center, and unscrew a total of 13 screws that are holding the metal plate and antennas to the Switch 2. The microSD express card slot can unplug like a little Lego. Thankfully, it is totally modular. With the silver backplate gone, the glorious insides are finally revealed. Surprisingly, the side-mounted Joy-Con magnets aren't glued in or anything. It's just a standard rectangular magnet that looks suspiciously like a cabinet door latch. But hey, if it works, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Magnets typically lose about 1% of their strength every 10 years or so these will probably need to be replaced here in a few centuries, so feel free to bookmark this video for later. The battery, however, depending on how often you use it portably, might only last a single decade. And it's super unfortunate that Nintendo has decided to permanently glue the battery to the housing. I'm not a fan of that. So only remove this battery if you absolutely need to, and just be ready to explode. The headphone jack is extremely modular though, pretty cool. We also have the dual lower stereo loudspeakers. These have waterproofing mesh over the openings, but this mesh only protects the speaker itself, not the console. If we go looking for balls, the razor tip of my JerryRig knife is a little flat, so I'll swap the blade around and basically have a brand new razor sharp knife within seconds. I'm biased obviously, but this knife is seriously my favorite, and I carry it with me every day. You should try it. The Nintendo speakers don't have any balls though. I'll remove the 4 screws holding down the copper heat pipe to the processor, and another 6-ish screws holding down the motherboard. There's also 3 screws holding down the turbofan. Then I can slowly pull the massive copper cooling up and away from the motherboard. It's under this heat pipe that we find the large ribbon for the exterior LCD display. So every screen repair will require removing the heat pipe and need new thermal paste unless you're into recycling, like I am. We have pinkish thermal paste connecting the top of the heat pipe to the silver shield we took off earlier, and gray thermal paste connecting the bottom of the heat pipe to the top of the processor, along with quite a few aluminum fins that let the air from the turbofan through to cool down the whole contraption. Supposedly the docking station also has a fan inside to help improve airflow even more when you're upscaling to 4K on a TV. With the screen ribbon removed, the motherboard can now come free from the frame. It's interesting that the vapor chamber isn't actually cooling the processor, it's only attached to the metal shield above the processor. Also, very disappointing that there's no Easter eggs in here. Like, Nintendo owns all the Mario characters, and has access to the Pokemon franchise. They couldn't put a Pikachu in here somewhere? I know Xbox hit a Master Chief inside of their console, and it would be fun if Nintendo could spice things up a bit. Neither the game card slot nor the dual USB-C ports are modular, so if one of those breaks, you're out of luck unless you can solder, but luckily there are 2 USB-C ports for redundancy, and either one should be working without the other. The fan is the same style turbo fan that we see in laptops and Red Magic gaming phones, and the battery, even after marinating in alcohol this whole time, is still very permanently attached, all 4,310 milliamp hours. The last thing to check before we durability test what remains of the screen is the male end of the Joy-Con attachment point. This guy is totally modular, which is great since it itself is a mechanical wear point. Besides the battery being glued in, everything else on this Switch 2 appears to be pretty repairable or have redundancy. And it's like a real bummer that Nintendo didn't release a transparent version like they did with the Game Boy Color back in the day, or the old school N64 controllers. I saw a statistic. I saw a stat that said 75% of American gamers play for at least 4 hours every week. And I feel like hardware that's capable of providing that many hours of quality entertainment deserves to be shown off. Which is why D-Brand and I made the Switch 2 Teardown skin ultra special. There are 17 Easter eggs this time around, and I'll have D-Brand add the insides of the vibrator coils to the Joy-Con skin before we start shipping. And it's all because of Nintendo hardware design that the Switch 2 survives both my durability test and my teardown. And with success like that, it should be illegal to hide the goodies away on the inside. Link is down in the description. Speaking of illegal, we did remove the plastic screen protector from earlier. And the only way to truly tell if the Switch 2 screen is going to scatter into bits if we shatter it is if we shatter it. After 13 hits, the Joy-Cons pop off, and I'm starting to think there isn't any glass and the whole thing is shatterproof plastic. Another 14 very solid hits, and the Switch 2 is shockingly still alive. "15 more and still nothing. This is wild. If watching this doesn't give you confidence in the Switch 2 durability, nothing will. Only after 50 hits from my ridiculously large pliers do we see that indeed there is a thin layer of glass on the surface. And as you can see from the slow motion, Nintendo was right, and it does indeed explode into little needle-like shards of glass without that laminate top layer. So I would definitely leave yours intact and in place. Most of the glass is still glued to the LCD, but there are still plenty of free shards of pulverized glass and dust that could embed themselves into little kids' fingers or eyeballs. So I'm glad that Nintendo has a top layer and nobody should take it off. Even though I did get a black screen of death, after a quick reset, Nintendo says it was just kidding about being game over and is ready to keep on playing. Basically, invincible. I'm a big fan of the Nintendo Switch 2. Grab your teardown skin at the link in the description, and thanks a ton for watching. I'll see you around.